friends, welcome to the first autumnal video of the year. As you can imagine, I am so unbelievably excited to share and film this video with you guys. This video is going to be an autumn book recommendations guide for you guys, but it's going to be a book for every kind of autumnal mood. I don't know what kind of mood you guys really get into in autumn, but I think I range somewhere in between cozy, pumpkin, apple picking to the dark academia side of autumn. So of course it meant I had to bring out my new pumpkin mug, and I've decorated the studio with mini pumpkins everywhere. One of the reasons why I am even more excited than I would be is because last year I didn't get to film an autumn book recommendations guide for you all. So yeah, I am so thrilled to be sitting here today. So for this video I thought I'd categorize the book so it's on a scale. So the scale is going to go from adorable pumpkin picking, cinnamon buns, Gilmore Girls kind of vibe to the more magical, slightly spooky, ghostly booze and slightly more moody atmosphere. And then we're going to dive more into the horror, the dark academia, more like autumn chills kind of vibe. So I hope you're ready with your cozy cup of beverage of choice. I've made some chai today and let's get into the video. I'm so excited. Okay, so the very first book we have on the cozy and cute scale is Garlic and Vampire by Bree Paulson. If you haven't read this graphic novel yet, you absolutely have to. I think it's one of my all-time favorites. It follows an adorable Garlic, and Garlic has a lot of anxiety and all she wants to do is tend to her garden. But when the village of vegetable people hear that there is a bloodthirsty vampire who's recently moved into the nearby castle, they all agree and vote that Garlic should be the one to confront him. I bought this book initially because it had the most gorgeous autumnal art and illustration style, but I fell in love with the cast of vegetable characters, and honestly, as I was reading it, I never thought I could relate more to a Garlic. It is such a lovely story about friendship, about putting yourself out there and getting out of your comfort zone and coming face to face with your fears. So I would recommend this book maybe in the evening if you're feeling cozy with your favorite jumper on, play some autumnal music in the background and have a cup of cocoa and just fall in love with these characters and this autumn atmosphere in the woods. I just went ahead and shuffled the book so that it's slightly easier for me to pull out, but the very next book is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell, and it's been illustrated beautifully by Faith Erin Hicks. If you're one of the girls who adores that pumpkin atmosphere, like pumpkin patches, pumpkin treats, everything pumpkin, then you have to pick up Pumpkinheads. It follows two friends who are seasonal best friends because they work at this pumpkin patch every autumn and Halloween season, so that's when they get to meet each other. But this year is slightly different because they are finally seniors, meaning that it's their last time working together, so they have to come face to face with a lot of the feelings that they might not have had the courage to address before. Because I live in the UK, our pumpkin patches aren't as elaborate and as beautiful as the ones in the States, and through this graphic novel I feel like I got a little glimpse of how magical autumn can be in the US. I would love to be able to visit America in autumn time and yeah, just be able to live out all my autumn dreams there. It's a very sweet story and you end up growing to become very fond of the two characters, or at least I did. And yeah, if you're looking for a really light-hearted, adorable read, then this book is definitely one that you should check out. It's time for a quick chai break. Sticking to the theme of slightly fun, cute autumn vibes, we have The Train of Dark Wonders by Alex Bell. If you want a book that captures the fun Halloween atmosphere, then you have to check this book out, and I don't think I've actually seen anybody talk about it, but it's a middle grade fantasy. It follows a girl called Bess, and her grandfather was a collector of odd objects, and he essentially has this museum of oddities, and she's given the keys to the museum one day. However, the museum is struggling to attract visitors, and if Bess doesn't do something about it, the museum is gonna have to close clothes. So when she discovers a magical train inside the museum bound for the land of Halloween sweets, she decides to hop on board. I fell in love with this book so much that I wanted to be a part of the little crew on the train. They end up meeting the most fun Halloween sweet inspired characters like the Minty Mummies and Spooky the cat. So if you want a Halloween book that talks non-stop about sweets and pumpkins and cobwebs, as well as the most atmospheric auditorium, then you have to check this book out. Moving away from the YA and middle grade but still wholesome is Library Cat by Alex Howard. This book is a cozy magical realism story that you can definitely finish in one sitting, and it's a book that's been inspired by the resident librarian cat of the University of Edinburgh. But essentially you follow Library Cat, who spends all his days in his favourite turquoise chair inside the Edinburgh University Library. The back of this book says this is a part whimsical story, part philosophical novella, and I wholeheartedly agree. This book is definitely more of a light-hearted read that explores certain themes of philosophy and questions the purpose of living and life, but it's definitely a more fun exposition of it. You've got photos of the real life library cat that people at the University of Edinburgh sent in. It takes place the majority of the time in autumn, which is why I thought I'd recommend it in this video. This is definitely a book that I felt like was a more self-indulgent, escapist writing project for the author, but it's a very fun one, so that's why I wanted to recommend it. Now, keeping to the theme of more fun books, we have a graphic novel by Miriam Bonastrata, and this is Hooky. This graphic novel actually reminds me a little bit of The Train of Dark Wonders in that they are both really wild and fun. But in this graphic novel you follow twins Danny and Dorian, and they unfortunately miss their bus to magic school, and even worse for them, they end up unintentionally making their way onto the wanted posters all across the country. Again, you meet such a fun cast of characters. There's a princess, there's a local troublemaker, and the art style is so beautiful that you can't help but fall in love with this world. This is a middle grade fantasy, but it does get slightly darker towards the end. But again, this is such a wild adventure and one that I had so much fun with. But if you're looking for a graphic novel this season that is definitely more to do with magic, as well as having more of a plot driving the story, then this one is definitely a lovely one to pick up. Now, moving towards a slightly more quiet atmospheric read, we have Days at the Morisaki Bookshop, as well as book 2, which is More Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa. Also, my copy of More Days at the Morisaki Bookshop is actually signed by the author, and it's so wonderful. I love it so much. This book series follows 25-year-old Takako, and Takako has never enjoyed reading, but she ends up finding herself in her uncle's old bookshop, and here she spends all her days dwindling away until she finally picks up a book inside the bookshop, and through that book she ends up falling in love with reading, and it invigorates her and gives her a sense of purpose once again. I wouldn't say this book series is necessarily my favorite, but there's something about it that keeps pulling me towards it, even though I didn't give it 5 stars. I think I ended up giving both like 3.5. It's set in Chimbocho, which is an actual area in Tokyo that I was able to visit last year, which was so magical. And Chimbocho is like a book lover's dream because all the streets are filled with vintage bookshops. But I did love those quiet moments where our character is basking in the beauty and the solitude of Japanese bookshops in autumn. I think I prefer More Days at the Morisaki Bookshop because I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, the tone and the more quiet, slow-paced nature of the book. And this book actually starts in October, I think. So if you want a book this autumn that is really reflective and quiet and has that sensory atmosphere of being enveloped in musty old books, then this book series is one that I think is a really lovely one to settle down with. Now, autumn is a time where I love picking up classics, and our next book isn't necessarily set during autumn, but it evokes that autumnal imagery. So for our very first classic, I ended up going with Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I recently found this edition of Northanger Abbey at TK Maxx and I had to get it. It's so beautiful and the colour palette is just evoking everything about autumn for me. But the reason why I had to include this book is because Northanger Abbey is a parody of Gothic novels that was so popular during Jane Austen's time. And Northanger Abbey follows 17-year-old Catherine, and Catherine is in love with reading Gothic novels, and much of the world for her is shaped by the novels that she reads. But because of her love for Gothic novels, she ends up coming into some embarrassing situations, and yeah, it's just such a lovely book that I really enjoyed. There were definitely moments in this story that infuriated me with some of the characters, but it really had a grip on me. I couldn't put Northanger Abbey down. I think Persuasion might be my favourite, but I definitely enjoyed reading Northanger Abbey as well. So if you haven't picked this classic up yet, I highly recommend. But moving into YA fantasy, we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I think I read this like last October, and in the vlog that I made, I think I might have said that I didn't enjoy this book as I was hoping to. However, the atmosphere in the book was so stunning enough to stick around with me, and I can't seem to let it go. So I think I might have to give this book series another shot, because I think it's a trilogy and all the covers are absolutely gorgeous. But this book follows Signa Farrow, who was orphaned as a child and subsequently was passed around from guardian to guardian, who all seemed more interested in her wealth and her actual well-being. And Signa sort of been associated with the untimely deaths of each of these guardians, so her only remaining relatives are the elusive Hawthorns. The Hawthorns are known for being eccentric, and their estate is very dark and gloomy, but this is where Signa ends up living. And during her time there, she ends up forming this unlikely relationship with death, and this book personifies death as a character. Because of the Gothic element and the fact that death is our character's main love interest, this book definitely feels really appropriate for a spooky season. I'm trying to recall why I only gave it 3.5 stars, because I remember the atmosphere being perfect for autumn, and I think it might have been because I found the dialogue slightly cheesy at times, but also I was reading at a time where I was so exhausted from having my wedding and my honeymoon, and I was just maybe not quite in the right mindset. I'm not too sure. Again, I might have to give this book another shot, especially if I'm in the mood for a Gothic fantasy. Now, for another book that's perfect for Gothic fantasy, we have here Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This book is set in Edinburgh in 1817 and it's a dark Gothic tale filled with mystery and romance. Our main character is Hazel, and she is a lady, but she's more interested in becoming a surgeon than in marrying, and so she ends up trying to sneak into this famous doctor's lectures and ends up promptly being thrown out of the lessons for being a woman. However, without official lessons, she's going to have to find a way to continue her studies, and this is where she meets Jack, who is a resurrection man, and that basically means that he digs up bodies for a living. Jack is really just trying to survive in a city where it seems like everything is against him, and so the two of them make a bit of an agreement. Jack is going to provide her with corpses to study on, and yet Jack has his own problems, and a lot of the friends that he seems to be working with end up going missing, and so there's a mysterious illness apparently that is going around the city, and the two of them work together to unravel its mystery. This story is crafted so beautifully. There is such a dark and morose and also nauseating element to it that maybe if you're feeling a little bit queasy is something you could steer away from. I actually ended up buying this book in Toppings in Edinburgh, and because I visited the city before I read it, I felt even more immersed into the atmosphere, and it was so tangible for me. All the streets and the descriptions of the dark gardens were so vivid in my memory. story. I will say though that I hesitate to call it a fantasy because it sort of only comes into play at the very end, and I really wasn't sure about the ending either. There is book 2, so I definitely need to read book 2, but I would describe it more as a historical novel with glimpses of fantasy and a little bit of romance sprinkled in it as well. So on the scale, I'd say we're gearing slightly more into darker territory with that book. But next up we have A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This book is definitely filled with much more fantasy, so if you're looking for a fantasy gothic romance book filled with descriptions of salty seas and destructive autumnal winds and crumbling manors, then this is the one for you. It follows a girl called Effie who ever since she was a child has been haunted by visions of the Fairy King, and she's only managed to find comfort and solace in this epic book written by a very beloved author. And the book is about a mortal girl who ends up falling in love with the Fairy King and then destroys him. So when she hears that the late author's family are hosting this contest to rebuild the crumbling manor of the late author's home, Effie decides to take it. I adored the slow build romance between Preston and Effie, and I felt like it was such a lyrical book. It was filled with mesmerizing writing, and I feel like Ava Reid did such a great job of making the entire reading experience feel like a really dark gothic fairy tale. The essence of a crumbling manor that is really being destroyed by these constant tidal waves was such a perfect backdrop to the setting, and it got really spooky towards the end, so I feel like it's a perfect read for when it's very stormy outside and you just want a book, maybe with a candle in the background, to really immerse yourself in peak gothic atmosphere. Next we're going to move into more dark academia territory, which is what I live for in autumn. I absolutely love, like I said in the beginning, having my cozy, adorable, fun reads, and then also those darker gothic, dark academia books. So first up, I couldn't not mention R.F. Kuang's Babel. I feel like this book is best to read when it's cloudy and very moody outside. It's set in Oxford in 1836, and in this fictional world that R.F. Kuang created, at the very centre of Oxford University there is the very prestigious and Royal Institute of Translation, and that translation tower is called Babel. You follow Robin Swift, who was born initially in Canton but then ends up being adopted by a mysterious professor who brings him back to England and enforces upon him this very intense studying of everything to get him enrolled into Babel. However, this paradise of a place ends up becoming a prison, and there's definitely something darker lurking underneath the tower. This book offers a very critical analysis of imperial England and colonialism and the power of language as well, and it absolutely put me together and it destroyed me apart. I remember sobbing my eyes out because of this one scene. That scene absolutely broke me. I couldn't work for the rest of the day. So if you want a book that will absolutely transport you to Oxford in 1836 and transpires across lots of different countries and continents, and this really is an epic book that you have to pick up. Next up is a mystery thriller dark academia that I absolutely had to include, and it's If We Were Villains by ML Rio. If you're a dark academia lover, you've probably already read this book, but I only read this last year and I was head over heels in love with it. Because I associate autumn time with going back to school, this book just felt like the most perfect book to read in autumn. In this book, you follow Oliver, who was put into prison 10 years ago, and he's just finished serving his sentence for a murder that he may or may not have committed. And on the day of his release, he is greeted by a detective who never really got a full picture of what happened 10 years ago. And so this story is Oliver telling and recounting everything that really happened. Oliver was one of 7 students who were enrolled into this very elite arts college, and all 7 of them were studying Shakespeare, but specifically the more drama side of things, so they were performing Shakespeare's plays. I loved everything about this book, from the close-knit friendship group to the academic setting, but the actual building was set in a castle, and so of course that adds to the dark academia element. The setting is eerie and spooky and gave me goosebumps at times, and I remember being so fond of Oliver. He was becoming my Robin in Babel. So if you're looking for a book this season that takes place in an academic setting by a castle and a lake where these students perform Shakespeare's plays, then If We Were Villains is one that you have to read. Staying true to Gothic books, we have a classic, and this is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a classic that I'm so glad I read last year because it's one of my favourites now, and it takes place, well, it starts actually during the summer months, and there's just exquisite evocative writing of summer. But as the book becomes more and more sinister and we progress more into the colder months, this book definitely is appropriate for autumn and those chillier days. This book opens up with Dorian, who is very handsome, and he is being painted by a well-known painter. However, as his eyes open to the knowledge that beauty brings power, he gradually becomes intoxicated with preserving his image, and he becomes more morally grey as time passes. So as he becomes more obsessed with carnal desire, his physical appearance remains unchanged in society, but the painting, the original portrait painted, locked up away in the attic, is telling a very, very different story. With the Gothic storytelling, as well as Dorian's own moral degradation, this book feels very appropriate for the Halloween autumn season when it gets spookier. It touches upon the philosophical matters of beauty and the extent that people will go to preserve their youth. And I was so entranced and captivated by this book, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite classics for sure. Sticking to the horror theme, we have a book that is a novella and one that I recently finished, and it's Graveyard Shift by Emil Rio. I feel like Emil Rio is just unparalleled in putting together this autumn mood. It takes place in this college's ancient cemetery, and you follow 5 different people who work the late night shift. They meet every night in this local cemetery, and one October evening they find that there's a hole that's been dug that wasn't there before. So this novella is basically the 5 of them trying to uncover the mystery behind it. If you are up late at night and you want to feel like there are characters who are also staying up late with you in this gorgeous spooky atmosphere, then Graveyard Shift is one that you can't miss out on this spooky season. I ended up devouring this novella, and I will say there is a reason why the rating isn't very good on Goodreads. I think it's because a lot of people, including myself, were very disappointed with the ending. I was left feeling like a huge question mark over my head because I felt like we were cut short. It almost felt like the book was building up to nothing. So yeah, that was very disappointing, to be honest. However, the atmosphere of this book is incredible. If you just want to wrap yourself up with a huge blanket in the middle of night and spend a couple of hours with very vivid characters who are also staying up late with you, then I feel like this book is a perfect autumn night read. And next up is a middle grade novel that I feel like you guys are going to mock me for, because yeah, I am a real scaredy cat, so the fact that the middle grade book is at the very end of this scale is quite funny for me as well. But it is The Haunting of Aveline, or Aveline Jones, by Phil Hicks. This follows Aveline, who loves reading ghost stories, and so when she ends up discovering a very old and spooky book during the middle of a very dreary half term, she becomes very, very excited. The book contains not only very spine-tingling scary stories, but it was actually owned previously by a girl called Primrose who ended up going missing. So Aveline takes it upon herself to look into Primrose's disappearance, and I read this initially maybe 2 years ago, and I actually was really terrified by a lot of the elements. Phil Hicks was so amazing at bringing together the spookiest parts of autumn. So we've got empty coastlines and foggy windows and stormy weather, and there's also this very cozy, slightly old bookshop, and she meets a friend called Harold. I actually really want to reread this book, so if you're looking for a spooky middle grade about ghost stories set on an empty English coastline, then definitely pick up The Haunting of Aveline Jones. And last but not least, I have 3 picture books that I really wanted to include in this video in case you want beautiful artwork and illustrations to decorate your space this autumn. Autumnal art is one of my very favourite kinds of art. So first up, I think I'm going to go for, I'm going to go for Margaret's Unicorn by Bryony May Smith. Bryony is actually one of my favourite illustrators and I was so inspired by her. Bryony's artwork is very reminiscent of those classic children's books that you grew up loving, and she just captures this very nostalgic element in her work. But this is such a precious picture book all about Margaret, who ends up moving with her family closer to her grandma's cottage by the sea. One day she sees that there are a bunch of cloud-like figures coming towards her, and she realizes that they're not clouds, they're actually unicorns, and the unicorns leave as quickly as they arrived, but they accidentally leave behind a baby unicorn. So for an entire year, Margaret gets to spend time with this unicorn as she looks after it, and they become friends before the unicorn goes back to join its family. But Margaret's unicorn, I feel like, is perfect for when summer is changing into autumn and that glow that starts coming in with the early autumn sunshine. And this is another book that I picked up from the Toppings in Edinburgh, and it's definitely a picture book that I cherish. And then another Bryony May Smith book that I just couldn't resist putting on because it's such a perfect autumn book is A Practical Present for Philippa Pheasant. Inside, the book is actually described as having bucolic artwork, and I wholeheartedly agree. I couldn't agree more. This is absolutely the most incredible depictions of English countryside and like that pastoral setting. But this book follows Philippa, who is a pheasant, and she lives in the woods nearby this village called Fairacre. However, one day as she tries to cross the road, she's almost knocked down flat by a car. And so when she sees one day that there is a lady wearing a bright yellow uniform directing people safely across the road, she decides that she is going to don this yellow uniform as well and try help her critter friend cross the road safely. It's actually the sweetest story with the most incredible artwork to go along with it. So maybe you're having a quiet autumn morning with a cup of coffee in hand and you just want to be surrounded by beautiful pictures of English countryside and woodland critters, then you have to pick up this book. And then last but not least, we have a book that's perfect to read during the cozy spooky season of autumn, and we have Rahat Khadouji's I'm Not Scary. Rahat is another one of those illustrators that I really admire the work of, and I've been following her for years. So when she initially announced that she was coming out with her debut picture book novel I'm Not Scary, I knew that I had to get it for myself. And so at the time I ordered a copy from her website, from her shop, and she even signed it inside, which is super special. But in this story you follow Bat, and everybody in the woods seem to be terrified of Bat and they make him out to be a monster. But Bat loves baking and all he wants to do is make friends and tell everyone that he's friendly. Rahat's art style is very different from Bryony's, but I love the way that they both capture this beautiful atmosphere with lighting and adorable creatures. In their own respective ways, they capture nature so magnificently. So those are all the different books that I hope you're able to enjoy this upcoming autumn fall season, and hopefully there's one for every single mood that you're in. There was actually a whole bunch of books that I wanted to tag on to this list, but I had to restrain myself in case this video was like 3 hours long. I just had the best time picking out these books for you guys and talking about it with you today. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next cozy video very soon. Bye friends.